Hello, my name is James Emery with Invictus Studios, and in today's material Quickshot lesson, I'm going to teach you how to dynamically change a texture's UV scaling with material parameters. So, all you need to get started is a single texture and turn it into a material, and you're good to go. So, once you've done that, we need to talk about UV scaling. If you don't know what that is, we can practice right now. Hit U on your keyboard and left click. This will bring out a texture coordinate node. If you look down to the left, you'll see U and V tiling. U controls horizontal tiling and V controls vertical tiling. To help you visualize what that is, take the pin from the texture coordinate node and plug it into the input of your texture sample UVs. As you can see, nothing has changed. But if we change these values that U and V have up or down, the texture will scale accordingly. If you put in a value higher than 1, the texture will start to tile more and the tiling will become noticeable. So let's do that now to get a picture of what I mean. You can clearly see the tiling here, all the repeating patterns. So that's what happens when you raise the scaling above 1. And if you go down, the texture will scale down and you won't see as much tiling. So let's do that now as well. So you see a value of 0.5, the texture scales down more, and the patterns aren't as noticeable. So, but that's not the point. I'm just showing you how this works. So let's get into what we came here to learn, which is how to make these scale in a material instance. So first of all, we need to talk about what a texture coordinate actually is. And it is basically the equivalent of a constant 2 vector. If you don't know what those are, you're going to learn what they are right now. So we have 3 or 4 types of constant vectors. You have a constant 1, a constant 2, a constant 3, and a constant 4. If you want to look at them, this is what you need to do. For a constant 1 vector, hit 1 on your keyboard and left click. This is a constant 1. To get a constant 2 vector, hit 2 on your keyboard and left click. To get a constant 3, hit 3 and left click. And to get a constant 4, hit 4 on your keyboard and left click. Alright, so if we take a look at these, you'll see the constant 1 vector has a single scalar value. Constant 2 vector has 2 of them, but a good thing to notice about these in particular is that they are R, G, and B values. Constant 2 vector only has R and G, constant 3 has R, G, B, and a constant 4 has red, green, blue, and an alpha channel. So that's what we're going to be working with, are these two in particular. So we can get rid of the constant 3 and the constant 4. So highlight them and delete them. So as I said before, the texture coordinate uses a U and a V, which are just 2 values. So you might be thinking, why can't I just multiply those values by a constant 2 vector or a constant 1? And the answer is that you could. If you hit M and hold down, if you hit M and left click, you'll get a multiply node. So plug your texture coordinate in. We'll just give this a value of 1 and plug that in. And what's going to happen now is that since these are at 1, you are technically multiplying the U and V scales here by this constant vector. So if you plug in a value of 5 here, it's going to scale both of them by 5. And if you wanted to, that would work. You could use that if you wanted to control both of them. The same goes here, but it's a little different. If you input values of 1 and 1 here and multiply it, you're going to be multiplying those by this constant 2, the U and V values by this constant 2. And again, it would work, which is fine. You could do this, but the problem with using this vector 2 comes in whenever you want to parameterize your material. And what happens when you parameterize this vector 2 is that you're going to get an error, because this is also a vector 2, or technically it's a floating point value 2, and so is this. And this is what will happen. If you right click and convert it to a parameter, you get an error. If you look down here, you have a float 2 and a float 3. This is float 2 and this is float 3 because it just added a blue value and technically an alpha, but it's not counting it as such. So you have a 2 and a 3. You cannot multiply, say, a vector 2 by a vector 3 or anything like that. Vector 1, vector 4, you can't do it. So we need to get rid of this. So what do we want to do here? Oh, and if you're also wondering, you could plug this in, and like I said, it would scale U and V, and you could even parameterize it. But the point of this lesson is to be able to have complete control over U and V individually. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So what you're going to need, set this back to 1, you're going to need 2 constant 1 vectors. So hit 1 again, or since you already know how to do that, click on the one you already have and hit Control W, and it will paste another one. Alright, so like I said before, this is a constant 2 vector and these are constant 1 vectors. But these two scalar values are going to control U and V tiling, but they can't do that right now. And the reason for that is that, like I said, this is a constant 1, so we need to somehow combine these 2 constant 1 vectors into a constant 2. You may be thinking, oh, we can use a multiply. Well, we can't actually do that. That would just be multiplying 1 by 1 and outputting a single scalar value of 1. So how do we do this? Right click and type in append vector. This node is going to combine these 2 single constant vectors into a constant 2. To help you visualize this, hit 2 on your keyboard and pull out a constant 2 vector. Input a value of 1 into the RNG values and then hit the drop down arrow. You'll see that you get an output value of yellow. So, and in comparison, if you click the constant 1 vector, you'll get an output of white. So what happens when we plug these together? It creates a constant 2 vector, which is exactly what we wanted. It's not like a multiply. It appends this vector to that one and gives us this, which is exactly what we want, because we can now parameterize these 2 values and make them control the texture's UV scaling, since these are set to 1 and 1. So if you plug this into the multiply, because you do need to multiply the texture coordinates by these values, this will complete your setup, your basic setup. So this is essentially all you're going to need just for this lesson, but we're not quite done. None of this is parameterized, and we're still working in a master material, and we can't have that with parameters. If you parameterize these right now, it's not going to do anything. So what we need to do is make a material instance. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. I'm going to explain it, and we're going to create one together. So let's go. Material instance is what we use to minimize recompiling times. Right now, we're working in master material, and say if we wanted to use this material on something in a viewport, we could drag it on there, like I've done here, onto the sphere. The problem is whenever I want, say I'm not happy with something, like these scaling values, I could come in here and change these values. But each time I do that, I have to hit save or apply. And what you'll witness is that this has to recompile and load each time that you do that. And it's not a problem right now because this material is not complicated. This is literally just 5 nodes right here and a texture sample. It's nothing. Your instruction count is only 59, so it's not going to do anything. But whenever you start learning more and start constructing more complicated materials, this instruction count is going to go up, and your recompile times are also going to increase. And sometimes it'll take up a minute or more, depending on shader count. So we use material instances to cut down on that, and I'll show you exactly what those do right now. So find the material that you've been working on, right click and hit create material instance. It's going to give it a name, such as it's going to give it this name, cobble mat, and then it'll have the naming convention underscore inst at the end of whatever your material is called. And this just helps so you can locate it easier. So what we need to do now is drag this material onto whatever's in the viewport that you're working with. Okay, so that material instance is now applied. Nothing has changed, so let's open it up and see what it looks like. Alright, so right here you got your sphere, just like we have in the material editor. You can change it just like you could before. And if you look over here, this is where you're going to be changing your parameter values, but you can see that we don't have any right now. The only thing we can change is our parent texture, and we don't want to do that right now. So let's fix that. So all you're going to want to do right now is convert both of your scaling values right here into a parameter. So right click and convert to parameter. Since this is like an albedo or diffuse texture, just name it albedo u size, and do the same with the v value. Let me spell that right. And that's it. You've just created your parameter values. They're used exclusively with instancing, so you can see your materials update at runtime or dynamically with no compile times. And you can see that they're still not showing up in the details panel, so you need to save your material if you don't see them. So after this is done saving, you'll see them immediately. So what you need to do is click on them to activate them. Go to your viewport, drag this window down, and then go down until you can see your values. And then when you edit these, you're going to be able to see your material update in real time without compiling. So this is what this looks like. And that's it. It is perfect. It works exactly how we wanted it to. You have control over the U and V scaling values, and you don't have any compile times. Material instances are incredibly powerful, so make sure to use them often to save on memory and other things. I really hope that you learned a lot in this lesson, especially if you're beginning. This should help you out quite a bit. Even if you're not, I hope you learned something new that maybe you didn't know. I know that up until recently I didn't know that you could dynamically change UV settings. But yeah, that was it for this material quick shot. I hope you had a good time. Look out for more of them in the future, and have a good day.